Welcome to Podcast Done For You, the show where we make it as easy as possible for you to make the right choices to advance your podcasting career. So let's get started on the show. Should you write a podcast script or talk off the cuff? The pros and cons, that's what we're going to examine in this episode of Podcast Done For You. Now, script writing is something that I am often asked about. How do you actually get it right, what you want to talk about for a particular episode? Now, there are certain things that I believe on the pro category that you should potentially have on a script. Might be the introduction. It might be a little bit of information about what the topic is that you're going to actually be talking about. You might have a few prompts in there along the way, but the real problem with script writing comes in to the fact that you end up with a situation where, are you actually qualified? Have you actually got the experience? Have you actually done the hard yards to be able to do one of two things? Read off a teleprompter or be an actor who can memorize a lot of things. In 99% of cases for business leaders, well, the answer is fairly simple. You're not qualified really to do either. And you can tell when someone is reading, and when someone is reading, they're not really speaking from the heart and they're not really connecting with their audience. Now, I actually had a really interesting debate with myself before I did this episode was, do I actually do part of this episode where I am reading a script to show it to you? But I don't want to do that because in part, I have spent plenty of time reading off teleprompters in my life, and I did learn that at university, so I totally understand the skill that is involved in being able to do that. And whilst that is not something that I actually do with my podcasts, it is something that I can do if I really wanted to. But for the average person out there, you really haven't spent that time in doing it. And it's not just the ability to read, because, hey, we can all read. And if you get the setup right, as you'll be able to see with the second camera that I've got going here today, that you can see how my setup is, and I've actually got a teleprompter in front of me. So the possibility of reading off a script is definitely there. But actually being able to read it in a way that feels like you're not reading it is, as I said, a skill. Now watch the evening news, for example, and the newsreaders don't look like they're reading a script, but they are. And that takes a lot of practice over a period of time. Now, it's not just the practice of reading that is important. It's actually the practice as well of being able to write in a way that you speak, because how we write often doesn't marry up with how we speak. And that is one of the cons as well, is that happens when you get script writing in case you end up over editing. What you start writing may well be similar to the way you talk. But what happens is as you edit further and further, and if you go along and use AI or use an editor, you end up in a situation where what you have on script is not the way that you would normally say it. And if that's the case, then you're not going to be connecting with your audience. And that is the real key here, is you have to be able to connect. So for me, there are a lot more negatives on the side of the script writing idea for a podcast than there are pros. But as I said, there may be a few key points that you want to have as a prompt, and that is totally fine. But that is very different to an actual script. Now, in fairness, what are the actual values of the script? Well, you can be very direct and succinct with your messaging and quite precise with it. If you have the ability to deliver it, then you can have something that is very fixed. And that is quite often what you think about when you watch, for example, a corporate video. Often those corporate videos are very highly scripted. Sometimes you even have an actor or someone that is able to deliver and front that for you, and that makes it interesting for a period of time. But I'd have to say that those things are a little bit of a relic of the past as well. And it's not something that I spend a lot of time doing when I've done any videos for bigger businesses in the more recent times, because I do find that when you watch something that is highly scripted, it just disconnects from you. You feel like you're being spoken at rather than someone having a conversation with you. And that's what I'm trying to do here now. You think about it. If you meet up with a friend or a colleague or a client for that matter, do you read off a script? No. So if you want to connect with them, what you do is you actually speak. And so that does mean that you have to be a master of whatever it is topic that you are looking to address on a given day. So that's something to keep in mind, because that's the reason you're doing the podcast in the first place, right? Because you are an expert in a particular field. If you have to write a script for that, then maybe you don't know it as well as you think. The other point is, and I've alluded to this in other podcasts that we've done in this series, is that quite often the problem is when you're trying to speak on your own to camera, as I am doing here today, it's not actually easy to pull that off on your own. It's actually a lot easier if you have someone that you're having a conversation with. It's one of the reasons why I do conversation-led co-hosting options in the Podcast Done For You package. And if you want more details on that, that is certainly in the show notes below. So please click below and you'll get some free resources and information there about how we can help you with that opportunity. But getting back to the pros and cons here of it, look, for me, the negatives in not having a script are, do you remember everything? Are there things you're going to miss? And like I said, there's a difference between having absolutely nothing and having thought about a few ideas first, popping a few notes on a screen somewhere that you can reference if you need to. It's a bit like when you go to make a speech somewhere. Now, there's a difference between those people who can deliver a speech in a way that feels like they are just talking to you and they've memorized certain parts of it, versus someone who is sitting there and is just reading everything and looking down the entire time. Because when you're looking down, you're not connecting. Which again, if you've got a teleprompter, which I'm gathering not all of you have, but again, in the free resources below, you will find a link to all of the software and all the technology and stuff that I advise using. And one of them is a teleprompter. We'll do an episode about that in the future. But right now, if you want a teleprompter, it's not a difficult or particularly expensive setup. The question is whether it's something you need in what you're doing. I'm churning out a lot of podcasts for myself, for clients. There is absolutely a value in it. One of the great things I love about a teleprompter is that I can be looking directly at you because the camera is right behind where I am seeing the screen. But getting back to it, the pros and cons, script or no script, well, to me, I think it's pretty comprehensive that the only reason you would ever use a script in a podcast is if it is for a very succinct bit of information that you feel you need to read. It's not dissimilar to when you see someone often when they're in trouble, think of a sports star or a celebrity, and they want to read a pre-prepared statement. Okay, there may be some odd things where you need to read something, and that's okay. But if you're talking about a whole podcast and if it's scripted, to me, it's a big no-no because you aren't likely to be connecting with your audience. And at the end of the day, your audience is there to connect with you. So they see you as the expert and they see you responding in a way that is authentic in the way that it would be if they were to have an actual conversation with you. So that's it for Podcast Done For You in this particular episode. As I said, lots of free resources below and of course information on how to connect with us on Podcast Done For You, where we do all of the things for you, including co-hosting the show. Then you know how to connect below. And of course, please, please, please don't forget to subscribe. All the details are below, whether you're watching here on YouTube or on any of the other podcast platforms. And we'd love you to leave a comment and suggest anything else that you want us to cover in future episodes.